Imagine spending your entire life bleeding for someone, skipping meals so they could eat, selling your memories so they could have a future, destroying your own body so they could stand tall, and then, on the most important day of their life, in front of hundreds of people, that person points at you and says, "Get her out." That is exactly what happened to Mama Rose, and the man who did it. The man who stood at that altar, chest puffed out in a tailored suit, ordering ushers to remove his own disabled mother from his wedding. He had no idea that beneath the floor he stood on, beneath every dollar that paid for that venue, beneath every dream he ever chased, was her. What he didn't know was about to destroy him. But before it did, one question hung in the air of that stunned hall, whispered by every guest who witnessed what happened. How does a man become so blinded by the world's opinion that he forgets the woman who gave him the world in the first place? Stay with me, because this story doesn't end with the humiliation. It ends with a truth so heavy, so devastating, that it brought a grown man to his knees in front of everyone he was trying to impress. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now and tell me, where are you watching from? And have you ever witnessed someone treat their family this way in public? Let me know below. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. You do not want to miss how this story ends. To understand how Emanuel became the man who stood in that hall, you have to understand the boy he once was. Emanuel grew up knowing two things very clearly. He was poor, and he was ashamed of it. He was sharp, ambitious, always the boy in class with the sharpest answers and the hungriest eyes. Teachers loved him. Classmates respected him. And from a young age, he understood something dangerous, that the world rewards the image you project, not the truth you carry. But the truth Emanuel carried was heavy. His mother, Mama Rose, had once been full of fire. She had dreamed of teaching music, of studying further, of building something beautiful with her life. And she had the talent to do it. But life doesn't always honor talent. An accident, sudden, careless, the kind that changes everything in a single second, took that from her. It left her with a body that no longer obeyed her, and a heart that refused to give up. From that day forward, Mama Rose became two things at once: a woman the world overlooked, and a force that never stopped moving. She cleaned houses before sunrise. Her hands cracked from the chemicals. Her back screamed from the bending. She stitched clothes for neighbors late into the night, long after Emanuel was asleep, so he would wake up to a full plate and a school bag that had everything it needed. She skipped meals, telling him she wasn't hungry, hiding the sound of her own stomach just so he wouldn't feel the weight of their poverty. On the mornings she couldn't afford the bus, she walked miles, in pain, without complaint, and she never told him, not once, because in her heart she believed that his future was worth every single cost. That one day when her son stood tall, the story would be complete. What she didn't know was that her son was already rewriting her out of it. By the time Emanuel was a teenager, the shame had become a habit. He learned to arrive at school events alone. He told friends his mother was sick, without explaining what that meant. He stopped bringing anyone home. He spoke of his long-absent father as though the man had shaped him, because that story felt more acceptable than the truth, that he had been raised by a disabled woman who cleaned other people's floors. And Mama Rose, she noticed every single moment of it. She didn't scold him. She didn't cry in front of him. She understood. She had seen how cruel the world's eyes could be. So she forgave him in silence again and again, tucking the hurt away behind her quiet smile. But silence has a price. And what was never said began to pile up between them like unpaid debt. As the years passed, Emanuel's life unfolded just as Mama Rose had always prayed it would. He graduated. He built a career. He walked through the world in sharp suits, with a confident stride and a version of his story that left no room for wheelchairs or cracked hands or kitchen tables with empty plates. And then he met her. The woman he chose to marry. She was beautiful, poised, from a family where appearances were treated like religion. From the moment she met Mama Rose, something shifted in her expression. Not cruelty exactly, more like the quiet calculation of someone measuring a liability. She never said anything unkind, not to Mama Rose's face. But behind closed doors, her whispers landed like slow poison in Emanuel's ears. She'll draw attention at the wedding. People will feel uncomfortable. Maybe we seat her somewhere quieter. It's nothing personal. It's just optics. And Emanuel, the boy who had spent his whole life running from the stairs, found himself nodding, not because he stopped loving his mother, but because the habit of hiding her had become so deep-rooted, so practiced, that agreeing felt like breathing. Mama Rose was told she would be seated in the back, not near the front, not in the family photographs. Somewhere quiet, out of frame, where the camera wouldn't catch her. She said nothing. She smiled. She nodded. And when they left, she sat alone and began to prepare a gift. The day arrived perfect on the surface. The venue gleamed. The flowers were flawless. Hundreds of guests dressed in their finest, filling the hall with the sound of polished conversations and rehearsed compliments. It was everything Emanuel had dreamed of when he was a boy, sitting at that kitchen table, watching his mother sew by lamplight. And yet, as Mama Rose rolled quietly through the entrance, the whispers began almost immediately. Not loud, never loud, but present, eyes darting to her wheelchair. A look exchanged here, a half-turned head there. The kind of social cruelty that wears the costume of politeness. She kept her chin up. She found her seat in the corner. She watched her son across the room, standing tall and glowing, and felt something rise in her chest that she could only describe as pride, even now, even here, even tucked away in the corner like something to be forgotten. When the ceremony reached the moment of a mother's blessing, a tradition in their culture, a moment that was supposed to belong to her, Mama Rose gathered herself. She reached forward with trembling hands. She began to speak words she had rehearsed for years, words of prayer, of sacrifice, of a love that had survived more than anyone in that hall could imagine. And then Emanuel looked at the cameras. He saw the guests recording. He saw the eyes of his bride's family. He saw every face in the room and felt, like a wave crashing over him, the familiar, suffocating shame he had carried since he was 12 years old. His face hardened, he pulled back, and then he said the words that would follow him for the rest of his life. "Stop. Not now, this is not the time." And then louder, firmer, his voice cutting across the stunned hall, "Someone get her out." The music stopped. The hall froze. Somewhere a phone was lifted. Then another. And another. Ushers stepped forward. Mama Rose did not resist. She simply lowered her hands, pressed them into her lap, and allowed herself to be rolled away slowly, quietly, with a dignity that put every person in that room to shame. A lifetime of sacrifice, repaid with humiliation, in front of everyone. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this story, because what's coming next is the part that broke Emanuel completely. The wedding hall. The ceremony tries to restart. Then, a chair scraping. An older man standing, the crowd turning, silence falling again. Emanuel straightened his suit, forced a smile, gestured for the music to resume, but the room would not cooperate. From the back of the hall, a voice rose. It belonged to an older man, a family friend who had known Mama Rose since her youngest years, long before Emanuel was ever born. His face carried the kind of anger that comes not from impulse, but from watching something unjust build slowly over years. He didn't shout. He spoke clearly, and the stillness of the room carried every word to every corner. He asked Emanuel how he could have just done what he did. And then he said something that stopped the entire hall cold. Mama Rose had paid for this venue. The room erupted. Emanuel's head turned slowly, like a man who has just heard something in a language he doesn't recognize. His eyes searched the older man's face for a joke, for a mistake, for anything other than what was being said. But it was true. Years before this wedding was even planned, Rose had quietly, secretly set aside money to secure this very venue, knowing her son's ambition, knowing the kind of life he was chasing, knowing that one day he would want a celebration worthy of everything she had built for him. She had approached the booking office alone. She had paid the deposit herself. She had told no one. The stage Emanuel was standing on, the polished floor, the gleaming walls, the chandelier casting its golden light over the moment he wanted the world to witness, existed because of her. The bride's hands trembled. Her mother stared at the table. And Emanuel, for the first time in his adult life, felt the floor shift beneath him. But the older man was not finished. He reached into his jacket and produced an envelope. One that Mama Rose had entrusted to him 3 days before the wedding, with simple instructions. "If something happens to me, make sure he sees this." Inside were documents, They told a story that had never once left Mama Rose's lips. For years, quietly and carefully, she had been saving every spare dollar, money scraped from cleaning jobs, from stitching, from every sacrifice that had marked her body. She had planned to give Emanuel a home on his wedding day. Not a card, not a wrapped box. A home, a foundation, a place for him to build his future with the woman he loved. But the documents carried something else too: medical records, prescription slips, doctor's notes marked urgent, strongly advised, patient refused. To save that money, Mama Rose had turned down treatments her body desperately needed. She had postponed surgeries, ignored prescriptions, sat through nights of pain that medication could have eased, because every dollar that should have gone toward her healing had gone instead into his tomorrow. She had not just given him her time, her labor, her meals, her dignity. She had given him her health, her chance at healing, the years that might have eased her suffering. Emanuel's hands shook as he held the papers. His breathing became shallow. The hall had gone so quiet that guests later said they could hear the chandeliers humming. And then slowly, the man who had spent his entire life building walls between himself and shame collapsed behind all of them. Word had reached Mama Rose outside. She didn't rush. She moved at her own pace, the way she had always moved through life, steadily, without complaint, carrying more than anyone could see. When the doors opened and the guests saw her re-enter, the hall was silent in the kind of way that makes a room feel holy. Emanuel looked up from the floor. Their eyes met across the distance. He tried to speak. The words came out broken, the kind of apology that knows it isn't enough, that exists not to fix anything but because a person's body simply cannot hold the weight of what it has done. He fell to his knees before her. Mama Rose sat still for a moment. Then she reached out with trembling hands, the same hands that had scrubbed floors, stitched seams, wrapped gifts, signed documents, refused treatments, and she placed them on either side of her son's face. And she whispered 4 words through her tears. "You are my son." She did not say, "You are forgiven." She did not say, "It's okay." She did not erase what happened or pretend the wound wasn't deep. She simply reminded him of the one thing that had never changed, the one thing she had built her entire life around, the one truth no shame, no wedding hall, no bride's family, no camera could ever take from her. He was hers, and she was his. And a mother's love, she had decided a very long time ago, was not something the world got to put conditions on. The hall wept. The bride wept. Even the guests who had come with their polished smiles and their careful outfits found themselves wiping their eyes, confronted with something more real than anything they had dressed up to see. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't keep score. It doesn't ask to be seen or thanked or placed at the front of the room. It simply works quietly in the background of someone else's story, cleaning houses, walking miles, foregoing medicine, so that the person it loves never has to know what sacrifice truly costs. Mama Rose had that kind of love. And Emanuel, he had spent years running from it, ashamed of the very thing that had made him. He had polished his image so carefully that he forgot what was underneath. He had chased the world's approval so hard that he nearly lost the only person whose approval actually meant something. He didn't deserve forgiveness. Not really. Not by the measure most of us would use. But Mama Rose wasn't measuring, she was just being his mother. The way she had always been. Quietly. Completely. Without condition. What this story leaves us with is not really about Emanuel at all. It's about the people in our lives who love us in ways we haven't noticed yet. The ones who sit in the corners we assign them to, smiling, saying nothing, carrying everything. Before it's too late, look around. Find them. And for once, let them sit at the front. If this story moved you, if it made you think of someone in your life who has loved you quietly and deserved far better, share this video with them right now. Don't wait. And if you believe Mama Rose's love deserved to be honored from the very beginning, drop a red in the comments. We read every single one. Like this video. Subscribe if you haven't already and hit the notification bell, because the next story we're about to share, it's going to hit even harder than this one.